practicing a bit of kindness, just asking how a person is, just the tone of your voice, everything matters. So we just need to be kind to one another, respect one another, because I think those are the things that are lacking. We are all human beings and we're all relational beings. We need that bit of kindness, the bit of love, and the bit of respect just to go on. So I just think it's quite important for us to practice collective kindness, especially during this time.
If you could mobilize a group of people, what movement would you mobilize and why?
I would call my movement the mindful movement. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death between people aged 15 and 29. 1 in 3 people are expected to suffer from mental illnesses in their lifetime. So I believe that mobilizing people to strive for mental health would actually fix so many social ills in our society. And that is what I would mobilize.
Let's see if... there we are. Hi!
Hello!
How are you?
I'm good. Well, I was trying. I could see you and I could see you going, and I kept pressing the button saying...
I've been trying my best to request everyone, and when I request Cayley, it doesn't allow me to request you. So it was so difficult, but I'm glad at least we have you here. Let's see if we can get Cayley on. Let's see. If we can't, we'll just start, and then hopefully everything works out as we go. How are you?
I'm very good. It's great to be here. I see lots and lots of numbers coming in, which is really good.
Yeah.
Because I think the topic really needs a lot of unpacking. It's pretty crazy happening in schools, so I'm looking forward to sharing some of that stuff.
No, we need to talk about this, because like we get a lot of questions about how us as a society can help, or how we can make sure that it doesn't continue, it gets perpetuated in our society. But it's so difficult to know where to start, and I think this is why this conversation is so important, so we can know where to start to see how we can assist. Because there was a recent passing of Lufuno, and there was a bullying video that was viral on social media. I think when we all saw that, we saw the implications of bullying. We saw how bad it can get, because usually when someone's being bullied, from my experience, you tend to withdraw. And sometimes you say, like, I speak until you're heard, but what happens after you're heard? And I think that's this whole conversation here. I see people, Young San, talking about adding Cayley. I've tried from both her accounts. It's not working. So I think we can start.
Okay.
I think we can start.
Be able to get in. For Cayley, and if it's just Cayley that just needs to come in, I literally exited a couple of times, and then suddenly your invite popped up. So
really?
It's all. Yeah, you keep clicking request to join, it doesn't work. You have to the whole thing and then start again. Then when I relaunched, I saw, hey, I got an invite. Okay. If that's the case, then we're good. Hopefully she can be able to make it. So it starts with that big question, if we're getting right into it. How do you help someone that's being bullied? So I think the real challenge, the work that we do at My Social Life is in schools for kids between the ages of grade 4 and 12. And I think the part is that I still don't think, and I'm in my 40s now, I still don't think we understand bullying. We don't understand the severity of bullying. We think we do. But Lufuno's suicide shows that we don't realize what's happening on the inside that we can't see. And I think that challenge, we just don't know who we're dealing with. So how do you help somebody is that you have to understand that it doesn't matter what you think about what bullying is. You have to consider what it might be for that person. Imagine if this person was very sensitive for whatever their reasons. And perhaps something that seems like nothing to you could be something that could pierce their heart and that could start thoughts going and could start to on a whole rabbit hole of thoughts. So I think point one is to really try and understand that bullying is so serious because it chips away at people's self-esteem. It starts mental health problems. It is very difficult to see. It's very difficult for people to tell you. So I think you have to almost have a really open heart and really open ears, and then to be able to a lot of support, to be able to truly listen. Not just listen, but hear the calls for that.
And I'm glad you touched on the self-esteem part, because I see someone here saying that it's got an effect on your self-esteem. So what are the long-term side effects of bullying? Because sometimes we think it's just the moment. We think, no, this happened now, you're going to get over it in a day or so. But you find that 20 years down the line, something that happened to you 20 years ago when you were 10 is still affecting you today just because you went through bullying. So what are the long-term side effects that you've seen?
I really do believe that self-esteem is probably the longest. I mean, that is something that is completely long-lasting. It's like if you, for example, have 1,000 Rand invested in the bank, and slowly but surely you keep taking 10 Rand out and 10 Rand out and 10 Rand out, all of these individual instances of things which look like teasing or sarcasm, even though they seem really small to you because you're very resilient, those things rapidly bring you 1,000 Rand to almost be into negative. And then if you're negative, it's hard to get back into credit. It's hard to bring yourself back to feeling this confidence, because something is slowly, and I'll use this word all night long, invisibly chipped away at this store of who you are, of your identity. It's chip, 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 chip. And it's so easy for people to dismiss that. But when you something that goes from a positive into a negative, you can understand how difficult it is to climb back out of that hole, which one of the effects from that spring, a lot of different branches from is mental health in terms of anxiety. Sustained anxiety can lead to depression. We're seeing a lot of self-harm in schools. We're seeing safety behaviors like obsessive compulsive disorder. We're seeing body issues because we're comparing ourselves to everybody else's lives. But it starts with chipping away at this thing where you are, when we're young, when we're little kids, we are enough, largely. And maybe something in our family or a trauma takes that away from us. But we are, and then slowly it dissolves.
And I think that's what bullying takes away from you, the feeling of being enough. Because the more you get bullied, the more you try to fit in to whatever mold that will make you less bullied. So that is a long-term side effect. And then what are the different kinds of bullying? Because I know there's the bullying that we see like in the video, but then there are other forms of bullying too.
Yeah, so I mean, in the world that I work in, which is very specifically about social media, gaming apps, children, so teens and preteens, there are so many of very subtle bullying. So we have trolling, shaming, catfishing, image-based violence, which is essentially taking photographs of people and kind of outing them and shaming them. We have things like harassment, ongoing perpetual harassment. We have things like Ask Me Anything apps. So those are not apps that you can log into. And it seems like real fun. You're just going to ask somebody a question. And what happens is why don't you go and kill yourself? And I see that in schools. People say, do you know everybody hates you here? Like everybody in that school hates you. Do you know that? And everybody would be happy if you weren't here. These are the realities. Because the anonymity of the net allows you to play around and put on different masks and have these different personalities and behaviors. And so it allows you to try and see what would it look like if I get this reaction from somebody. Or I would be able to assert my dominance. And this is what the core of it's all about, is if we're feeling insecure or if we're feeling fearful or if we want to assert power over somebody, then the internet is incredible, because I don't even need to give my name or my photograph or anything, and I get to play around with you like a toy and see if I can dominate you. And that's complicated because so many people are not aware of the impact of the things that they say. They just don't know that for some individual, like say Lufuno, that can tip you over.
Yeah. And one of the biggest questions, especially with that case, was how could have teachers helped? How do we help? How do teachers and schools manage bullying to make sure that it doesn't escalate or exacerbate to the point that it did with Rufuno?
Yeah, the real challenge here is that in a way we need to get the teachers, like what we're talking about now, and the purpose of this really brilliant thing that Sadag and yourself are doing is we need to understand that this is not a light situation, even though we could dismiss it. And if teachers can understand that and start to look for it, if parents can look for signs of changes in the behavior, sleep, homework, joy, aggression, all of those types of things, if teachers are looking for it, if parents are looking for it. But you know what's really strange is if there was a reporting system, like Cayley's, if there was a reporting, perhaps the student body, other individuals that saw that issue happen on that campus, that somebody could have alerted it and said, I've seen something so bad happen, I'm worried for this person's mental health. That means somebody alert the teacher can alert the parent, and then by the time that somebody gets home and starting to consider something like self-harm, that perhaps there is some awareness around it. But collectively, you have to tighten the net. Teachers need to think, they need to not dismiss it. Parents need to go, this is a real thing. I would hate this to ever happen in my life or in my world. And then, funnily enough, I think the students play a big role. They're all very scared. But there's anonymous reporting. There can be a chain in which people can say, listen, this thing happened and it's really bad. We lost a 13-year-old girl in Pretoria last year. And I always think to myself, I wonder if the people that knew about this instance, this betrayal that happened to this girl, and then she on Monday, if the people inside the student body, inside that grade, were able to say, this is really problematic. I'm really worried for this person. You can get a chain of people saying, let's watch this person. Let's intervene here. Let's check that she's okay.
And I think that's the importance of Cayley's app. I wish she was able to join because it does help a lot when there's some sort of reporting system where sometimes you can't speak on your behalf, but if someone sees it happening, then they become part of the solution or part of the problem. Because another thing is just sitting back and spectating from the sidelines while someone is being bullied and doing nothing about it. Obviously, we don't have the power to just actively get involved sometimes, and I know that's a common problem, but then if there's a way to report it and a way to not normalize it and to shine a light on it, it does go a long way. But one thing that you touched on earlier was the different kinds of bullying, cyberbullying being one of them. What makes it so different from traditional bullying? Because in as much as it's on the other side of the phone, it still feels as hurtful.
It really does. There was a Vodafone survey done around this particular, around teenagers in 13 different countries, in which South Africa came fourth. It was done by Vodafone, a very, a huge network. And what had happened was that 60% of the students in 13 different countries said that bullying was worse than face-to-face bullying. And the reason why it's so bad is because it's that anonymity. You never really, or sometimes you don't really know where it's coming from because people are using fake profiles. But the other thing is, it's public because other people can see it inside instant messaging and inside social media. It's always on. Your phone is sitting there and you don't really know how to put it down or turn it off because you want to keep seeing. You're hoping this issue is going to go away, but it doesn't. It's always on. It's always on. And the other challenge is that it's viral. And with Lufuno, you look at the way in which people had phones and you look at the way in which it was recorded, the humiliation and the shame alongside the dominance, like the sheer fear of that situation. And then the reality and the publicness of it, layer on layer, which magnifies this feeling of being crowded and pulling yourself back. And that's where the thing going into your head and you're like, I'm in a corner here, and I think that's the challenge, is public, viral, always on, anonymous. There's a whole load of kind of like shadows in a room that we don't see, and those are and so that's what I always say to people is try and consider that. Try and consider these energies that are around when it just looks like, hey, there's somebody here having a go at somebody there, they're strong enough. I'm like, no. Oh, Cayley.
I don't think I've ever been as happy to get onto an Instagram live before than right now.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Oh, I've been listening to the conversation and I've been like, oh my goodness, I just want to dive in and chat with you guys. I don't know why this isn't working. Same case.
No, but if you can, we touched a bit on your app, and we were speaking about the importance of having some sort of reporting system where we can report bullying, because sometimes it's not easy to report it yourself. They say, hey, I'm going through bullying. But if there are people that are seeing this happen and they want to help, please tell us a bit more about your app, because I believe that it does something like that.
Awesome, thanks so much. Yeah, so I brought FaceUp to South Africa in 2019 purely because I noticed a gap in that reporting from a school perspective. So kids, not being able to go to teachers, not being able to say that, look, I'm struggling with bullying, or I'm struggling with depression or suicide or any of that. So that's kind of the main purpose of FaceUp, is just to assist from that perspective. Because I also don't believe it's just a learner situation. I also believe that we need to train teachers to be able to handle what's happening, be able to say, this is what you do in a bullying case and this is what you don't do. Whether it's sexual harassment or cyberbullying or whatever the case may be, teachers need to be trained in that. And then we've also, workplace bullying is huge at the moment. So we also, go into companies, because companies and schools, you can't create change from the outside. I've learned that you have to create change from the inside out. So, it's very much a belief of turning people in general, especially students, into everyday heroes, being an upstander.
And in this discussion from both of you guys, we speak about the victim who's being bullied, but I think it's equally as important to speak about the person that's bullying the other person, the perpetrator, because one thing that I had to learn was that it's never personal, and how they treat you is a reflection of them, not a reflection of you. So if that's the perception that the person has of themselves, how do we help that person? How do we help both parties? Because in order for the problem to stop, we have to tackle both sides.
I completely agree. I was just about to say, do you mind if I go? So from a psychology point of view, there is so much, the bully needs help just as much as the victim and the bystander. So the reason that kids bully is often because they're reinforcing what they see online, or maybe they get bullied at home, or there's aggression in the family, or they're struggling with low self-esteem or confidence, and maybe their academic pressure is low as well, so they're looking for an outlet. They may be struggling with depression or anxiety, or, there's so many different things that could cause somebody to actually start bullying somebody else. And it could be somebody that's a victim and is now looking for revenge as well, or a bystander that was a bystander that, at the end of the day, they took a video of somebody, like in this Lafuna case, they took a video. Does that make them a bystander? Does that now make them a bully? Because they're not sharing this online. So there's a very, very fine line between why somebody bullies.
Go home after school, it's going to continue. So the challenge is that, as you said, it's not personal, it's about focusing on the behavior of that individual. And I think what needs to happen is a culture of not wanting bullying in school. You have to have you have to have somebody that cares. You have to have somebody that says, we need to watch out for this situation. This is a really complex situation. Because we are talking about self-esteem, about suicide, self-harm, cutting, So these are really important. And yet, sometimes we've kind of got these very broad brushstrokes about a bullying incident. We need to look and see if it's perpetual, if it's ongoing, if it's incredibly harmful, if we can see these changes, and we can't always see the changes. Sometimes kids can be so secretive or feeling so humiliated or embarrassed that it's really difficult to see it. I've seen some children who have committed suicide, and school and say, we just couldn't see it. And so I think it's about almost paying attention, really paying attention to who needs that behavior to be help themselves through that behavior, where perhaps maybe they've experienced bullying or they've seen bullying online. We need to actually show them what's really happening and what it feels on the other side and the extent of what they're doing to other people. Because I don't know, Cayley will probably explain better, but we don't always fully identify with what we're doing when bullying. I don't think people fully go, nah, it's just for them, it's sarcasm, it's just this. It's like, it's not on the receiving end, and that's a challenge.
I completely agree. And I mean, the other thing, you know, one of the reasons why I started FaceUp was purely because teachers are, in my belief, the first aid when it comes to learners from mental health side. So teachers are the ones that are spending the most time with learners, and if they don't know how to identify if somebody's suicidal or if somebody's being bullied, you know, there's lots of warning signs as well that we do normally see. So we do need to work together, I think, from a community perspective, just to be able to say, you know, and help teachers as well, because I think they're so burnt out and there's so much happening, you know, and like everything happens, it's not, social media and school and home are not three different worlds. It's one world. You know, it's just one place. It's no longer a separate space anymore. And that's why, you know, for example, why FaceUp is an app. Purely because that's what learners love. So they can actually then dive right in on their best friend, but actually get the help they need.
I think she broke up a bit there.
Learners. We do also launch in companies as well.
Okay. No, she's breaking up a bit. What I wanted to ask though is how do we prevent bullying in schools? Actually, bullying in all environments, because a lot of people that are watching this are people that work in workplaces as well. So how do we prevent bullying in those environments? Bullying at schools, bullying in the workplace, and even bullying at home, because that's something that a lot of people go through. How do we prevent it? Because prevention is better than cure. So how do we get to that point?
While Cayley comes back, I mean, you know what? So difficult is it's so admirable that we want to and we should want to. Do you know, many things sit inside our environment. So if we see bullying in politics, local and international. It's not just exclusive to South Africa. We see it on social. You have to go onto Twitter. Twitter goes crazy. And so it's really difficult, because what we need to understand is, and to answer your question is that we don't need to be a part of that. Changing bullying, and you realize that it is invisible and that it is and that it leaves dents inside people and that you just do it even though it's all around you. It could be in your home, it could be on Twitter, it could be in your... But try not to adopt the behavior, because actually as humans, sometimes we do. When we feel pain, there's a brilliant video by a guy called Prince EA. He's so awesome. And we show a lot of his stuff to our students. And he says hurt people. And we need to realize that we can change the outcome of how we are feeling, one tiny step at a time. We need to understand that bullying only stops when we make a decision to say, I want no part of that. And it's difficult because people wind us up. You know, it sits in our environment. People at work, people that are trying to get ahead of us, people that are sniping. It's really difficult. And so what I'm trying to say is it actually starts, it's very cheesy to say, but it's true. It starts one person at a time. Ideally, it would start from leadership level. It would start from government level. It would start from school culture. That's how it really... But they're not really showing examples. And so what we need to do is we need to go, no, man, that's not cool. And if people start to understand that social media is having such a huge influence in the same way in which we digest food. This is probably the most important thing that I will say is that we train the Red Cross Child Psychiatry Unit, and we help them because they say, you wouldn't believe what we see. And what we say to them, that we are consuming things through our eyes, it's being processed in the back of our brain, and it's being stored in our own operating system. I wish I had my phone with me, but I'm talking to it. We have our own operating system, and inside our operating system, we have apps, and we can get apps. We can be jealous and envious. Let's replace those with apps like kindness and generosity. And as cheesy as that sounds, you then become part of the solution. Because ideally, that would be leadership, government, regulators, education institutions. But that's low. We can control our output, and we will get so much more if we go, I'm not going to do that. And that's what's really difficult, is to make that individual.
And I think I'm so glad that you highlighted it, because earlier in asking that, how do we help the bully as well? It does not take away from the accountability of the fact that you chose to bully someone else, you chose to abuse someone else. It doesn't take away from the accountability, because I think, like you're saying, everything is a choice, and it starts with us as civil society and different structures in this country working together to actually not normalize and end the normalization, if that's even a word, of bullying, because it's been normalized in different settings, from schools to workplaces to homes. It's almost like it's in our environment, it's everywhere, but only until a life is taken do we say, oh, okay, it's actually a problem, you know. And it should never even get to that point, you know, like it should never get to a point where someone has to die by suicide for us to say that it's actually a problem. But a lot of people are going through this in different spaces in our society. So how do we change the environment that we live in? How do we change? And you're right, it starts with different structures, but then now a teenage girl has died, and we're trying to find solutions. What are the solutions? How do we help?
I've been watching some of the comments. There's been some amazing comments on this thing. People are reading it, and it's awesome. Is that it starts with this important